Hi guys, in this video I want to show you another technique for painting materials in Unreal 4. So we've got an object like this, and the issue we'd have with an object like this is that it's too big to really texture as a prop in 0 to 1 space. So if we put a 0 to 1 texture on this, it's going to look quite low resolution. Obviously this could be much bigger as well, and it could have loads of pipes coming out of it. It could fill out a massive kind of industrial factory scene. So we want a generic material that we can use to fill out loads of our scene. However, what we also want to do is a normal tiling texture is not going to work, just because this is going to be like a rusty old machine. So I want sort of rust painted into all of these areas, and I want oil leaks coming down from the top and dirt around the bottom, all that kind of stuff that we would normally paint in. So another option would be to vertex paint it, but vertex painting isn't always the best solution for objects like this, simply because perhaps we just don't have enough verts to get the kind of detail that we want. And if you imagine this as being a big industrial scene full of pipes and old rusty machines and all that kind of stuff, vertex painting is just not going to be scalable because of the amount of verts that we would need to put in, and also the modelling is going to start to get a lot more complex. So what we can do instead is we can paint this with masks. So what I've done is I've just quickly unwrapped this object in 0 to 1 space, and what we can do is basically just create a black and white mask. So let's call this rust, and we'll have another layer called oil, and what I'm going to do is just paint white where I want my rust. I'm going to use a soft brush. This will make sense kind of close to the end. I'm going to use a soft brush so that I can get some, do some different things with my fall off in here. So I'll paint a bit of this rust in. Some rust there, some rust there. Let's have a bit coming out. Some around these sides. Obviously this is going to be good for us sort of setting up this material, but I would recommend spending quite a bit of time doing this. Just have some in there and some at the end. A bit in there. Okay, this will do. I think we'll that'll be enough to get the principle across of what we're doing. So that's my rust. Just have a splodge in there. And now I'm going to put some oil leaks on as well. So get rid of my rust layer, get my oil layer, and for this I think I'm going to, let's have a look, leak texture. Do. In fact, just to make things quicker, let's see if I can get one that's got some alpha in it. I think that one might. Yeah, let's just do that one instead. So it wants to be black and white, and alter our levels to make it a bit more like that. Okay, that fits extremely nicely. It's lovely. Let's just flip that and put it there. Okay, this is unwrapped really badly. The seam of my object is at the top, kind of up here. So don't unwrap something like this, but I'm just trying to get the general principles across. Right, so we've got 2 layers, we've got some rust, we've got some oil. We probably want to make another layer now to paint in some dirt, and maybe another layer to paint in, I don't know, some other kind of dirt or some paint or something like that. Right, what we'll do is just put this stuff into pack this stuff into some channels. So I'll get my rust and put it into a red channel, and I'll get my oil and put it into a green channel. So obviously I could put something into the blue channel as well, and I could put something into an alpha channel as well. Okay, let's save. By the way, this image is 2048 by 2048. If I needed more detail, which I don't think I will, I could go up to 4K, but I think kind of more importantly that this technique would work pretty well at 1K as well. So I think 1 or 2K is probably the sweet spot for an object like this. If you're got a big scene with pipes and stuff, maybe just 1K materials would work for those. Okay, let's import that. And let's create our material. So to demonstrate this, I am just going to, I'm going to use some of the starter content stuff. So I think we've got some metal somewhere. Come on, metal. There's some rust. There's some metal. And let's just find something we can use for oil as well. I'll just use this concrete. What I'll do actually is I'll just take this concrete and just subtract a bit from it to make it dark. That'll do. Obviously I author a metal texture, author a rust texture, and so on. Okay, so the principle of this is going to be that I will take my mask and I can then use that mask to lerp between these. So let's get a lerp, in fact a couple of lerps. So the red channel where we painted our rust is going to power where the rust goes. So our base, which is our metal, goes into A, our rust goes into B, and it's this mask that's going to say where these things should go. So if I have a look on here, you can see we've got rust now wherever we painted rust. We can then lerp between all that lot and our oil, and we put our mask for our oil in the green channel. Let's just stick that one in base colour. Obviously you need to, I'm just going to try and get through this video without making it too long, but you need to repeat this whole process for the roughness and the metallic and the normal map and so on. Let's just save that. And then you can see that's kind of working. What I will do actually just quickly is I will just set up my metallic as well. So I just want to lerp between a value of 1. My rust should be a value of around 0.4, something like that. And then my oil is going to be a value of 0. So this is my metalness value for the metal, which is 1. and that's controlled by the red channel again. And then we add in our oil over the top. Okay, so our metal looks a bit more like metal. Let's just comment that. Metal. Let's just do the same for our roughness actually, just so that it does look a bit more like this material. So roughness, you need to author roughness maps. I'm a big advocate of authoring roughness maps rather than using kind of diffuse data to derive them from. I think they need to be separate things. For stuff like metal, you want like scratches and stuff in your roughness map. But for now, a roughness value of let's say 0.3 for the metal, the rust 0.7, and the oil is maybe going to be a bit shinier, so 0.4. I'm really just guessing at these values. So that can be my roughness. Again, the red channel is powering that, and the green channel is powering that. So let's comment that. Roughness. Okay, so that'll do for our kind of basic values. What we want to do then is, obviously this is looking really low res, and the whole point of this method was that this would look nice and high res. So we can tile everything up now. So let's just add in a texture coordinate, and what we'll do is we'll multiply it by a parameter. If this is going a bit fast, I suggest watch the previous video on vertex painting, which is a lot of it's very, very similar to this. So let's just hook that up, and let's call this parameter base tile, and we'll set its default value to about 8, so you can see it's tiling up now. And what we'll do is we will create a material instance, and we'll use the material instance on there. So now I can change the tiling in this material instance and find the kind of sweet spot for this. I think about 8 was about right. That's nice and high res. Looks about right to me. Okay, so what we want to do now is, if we have a look at our fall off between our rust and our metal, it just looks really unrealistic, the way that this fades out. So what we can do is we can create a mask for that. So what I would do is just go on to wherever you want to find your images from and look for a rust texture. And we'd want something that's kind of speckly, that gives us that fall off that you get in rust. So something like this would be good. And then you want to author that into a black and white mask. So I've got one of these that I've made that I think I'm just going to use again. So something like that. And this will give us kind of an alpha for how, so we want there to be rust, we want there to be metal, and then where the rust and the metal blends together, instead of it kind of going soft and feathering out, we want to have this pattern instead. So you might want to do another one of these patterns for your oil, although I don't think you need it for the oil. You probably definitely want one for dirt and stuff. And again, pack these all together. So at the moment this is just in my red channel, but I could maybe put fall off for oil in the green channel, fall off for the dirt in the blue channel, and that would all match up with the channels that I used in here. Now they have to match up, but it just makes sense to keep things as consistent as possible. So anyway, author something like this. Obviously really important, this tiles, but just make sure you make a tiling texture, essentially. Right, so let's bring in our alpha. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try and, in this red channel, we're going to try and mask off the areas that are kind of got high values in them. So if I was to, one way that I can do that is to, I want to kind of alter the fall off so that I just get a sharp fall off. It's hard to explain this, but it'll make sense when I do it. Again, this is really similar to what I did in the vertex painting tutorial. It's just a slightly different method of doing it. So what I can do is if I add a power node in there, that will kind of crush things down that are grey. So if I set that to like 500, it'll really crush things down and just keep the things that are white. So I can power that with a scalar value, and we can call this something like rust main fall off, something like that. Let's set that to about 500. But what we might want to do is to have a bit more of this rust as our kind of solid rust. So to do that, we'll just bring the values up a little bit before we put them into that power. So I'll just add a bit of something onto them. So if I was to add like 0.1, okay, this is blowing out now. So it's not actually gone white, it's actually gone, it's just started to glow. And the reason it's glowing is because we've now got values that are above 1. So after this power, let's just clamp things down so that they don't go above 1, and let's preview that instead. So now with my add, as I kind of bring this up, I'll get more of this stuff. I still get sharp fall off, but I'll get more that comes out or less that comes out. So this is going to be our kind of rust base amount. And let's give that a default value of about 0.1, 0.2. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I've got something that will, let's just save this. I've got something that will power how much of this base amount I get. And I've got something that kind of feathers it out as well. So as this goes down, it feathers more. As this goes out, it gets sharper. Okay, so this is what we want for our base rust, but then all the bits that are still grey in this red channel that aren't in here, we want to have this fall off on. So what we can do is we can add a bit onto this again, and that will bring up the values of those grey bits. In fact, let's not add, because I don't want to bring up the values of the black. So instead of adding, let's multiply instead. That way the values of the black will stay the same, but the other values will get bigger. So if I multiply that by 50, let's say, well, let's go 10 maybe, the values of my grey come up, but the values of the black have actually stayed the same. Again, it's just glowing. So let's clamp that as well, because we don't want values above, we don't want values above 0 and 1, or sorry, 1, values above 1. So let's clamp that. And now we've got a kind of fall off distance, this is. So let's call this fall off distance. So as I increase that value to, let's say, 20, I get quite a lot of fall off. If I go down to 1, I'll get a bit less. We also need, actually, before here, we need a power node as well to crush those values back down. So I'm not sure if we need a parameter for this. I might just set it really high. Ooh, oh, 5,500. So this is basically exactly the same as what we did here. But we want to keep these bits now that are, so all the bits that are in here that aren't in here, we want to keep, and then we want to put this alpha over them. So what we can do is just subtract one from the other. So if I take this and subtract this, I'll have the bits that are just the fall off. So I've kind of cut holes out the middle of them where we had this base value. And right, so what I want to do now is with that I want to change this, so instead of it being just white I want it to be this texture. So all I need to do is take this texture and multiply those two things together. So it was in the red channel, so now I've got this speckling just in those areas. Now I can add things back together. So let's add that speckle value back to the original base that we had. And now we've got this solid bit in the middle and these speckles on the outside. I want to make sure that this tiles as well. So this speckle value should tile. Let's just set up a new parameter and call it rust fall off tiling. And let's set that to about 8 as well as a base value. And actually I think what I might do is take this power and just put in a scalar parameter for that as well. So I can feather it out slightly if I need to. So this can be rust fall off feathering. And we'll set the default value of that to about 500. Okay, we've added these two things together, so let's just make sure that we clamp them again because they're going to be up at values for around 2. And now all of this here controls our rust fall off. So that's going to plug into all of these alphas for these lerps. So for that one, for the roughness, and for the metalness. Save. Okay, so now you can see we've got this kind of solid bit of rust, and then where it starts to feather out we get the fall off. So this doesn't quite look right, it's getting there, it looks better, but it's not quite there. we just need to play with some of our settings. So I think the tiling should be a bit higher on this, probably more up around maybe there, 15 maybe. And then we just need to get our distances right, so maybe increase the fall off distance a bit. What's this one? Rust base amount. I think that probably needs to come down a little. I think we need a little bit of feathering actually on this just to soften the transition. Sorry, it's that one that I want. So as this comes down, they'll feather out slightly. Somewhere around there looks okay, I think. So we're getting there with this. I think I'd want to play with my settings a little bit more. And the other thing that obviously would make a big difference is just spending some more time now experimenting with painting this stuff in Photoshop. But you can see we've got a much more realistic fall off on the rust. Maybe increase the tiling a bit more, even a bit less. The other thing that I could do that might make this better is experiment with my with this texture as well. So this might not be the best texture, but now it's all set up in Unreal. It's much easier to go and experiment with these things in Photoshop and get them right. So the same principle would apply to things like the oil leaks, and you could add dirt and you could add various different things. Where this technique really starts to make a lot of sense is once we do, so let me just save this, once we do this, we get our original mask and we convert that to a parameter, and we'll call that something like base mask. Save that. So now what we can do is this material that we've made, this material instance, this would be our rusty machine, but we can now make another material instance and call this something like rusty pipes. We could make another material instance and call it something like rusty barrel. We could make another one and call it another rusty machine. Obviously I would use better naming conventions than these, but it kind of makes the point. So all that I would do now when I made my barrel is I could make a nice 1024 by 1024 mask and just take this instance and plug in the new mask for that. So the material would all stay the same, everything would be powered with the same material, everything would have the same metal, the same rust, the same fall off on the rust. Obviously if the barrel's smaller I'd probably want to have it as slightly lower tiling, maybe I'd want to play with some of these parameters as well, but it's all there and ready to go. So on its own this isn't probably the cheapest way of making material, but if you imagine a scene with let's say 50 objects in it with this material on, it would start to become really cheap, because all you're changing in every material is just adding this simple low resolution mask, and that's all you need to power it. So normally in a game you would need, let's say if you had a barrel, that would probably have a let's say a 2K diffuse texture, a 2K normal texture, and a 2K texture that had things like the gloss, the roughness and the metalness and perhaps the AO in it. Using this method, instead of needing those 3 2K textures, you could probably just get away with 1 half K texture, so 512 by 512. So I don't know if I would use it for something like a barrel. I think something the size of a barrel, you actually are better off going with just the old-fashioned, just make a prop. But once stuff starts to get bigger like this, and if you want to keep decent resolution on this as a prop, you're looking at 8K textures, so you're looking at an 8K normal, an 8K diffuse and an 8K reflectivity map. Instead of that, much better just to have one 2K map that then drives a material. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. I hope this has helped clarify a few things. Epic use this technique quite a lot in the materials that they make, and I'd say this is a very kind of modern way of texturing things in games, so it's a good technique to learn.